Book 74 of 2020 was Start Here by Mel Robbins. So, when I was just about to make this video, I was convinced that I've already recorded this video, but I had a bit of an issue with my laptop where water went all over it. There's loads of backstory, but let's not get into it. So I thought maybe it was on the laptop, but I got a pen drive of what was on the laptop from the IT person, and I've looked through that and it's not on there. So perhaps, given that this is the third of Mel Robbins' books that I've read, I'm just getting a little bit of deja vu and thinking that I've made it, but it was maybe the last one. When I wrote the review, which again was a long time ago, I didn't actually remember reading anything of the book until I listened back to it and realised that a lot of the advice that Mel Robbins gives in the audio book I've actually incorporated into my life. So it's obviously had an impact on me, but it's one of those things where when you read a lot, you don't really remember the content of the book, but you remember it in some kind of way because you've incorporated it into your life. I find I kind of do that quite a lot. Now, this technically is not a book like Mel Robbins' other one that I reviewed. You'll be able to go and find it if you're interested, though there's 3 of them now. It's like it's a podcast rather than a book, but it's on Audible as a book, which is why I'm counting it as a book. And the way that it's broken down is that each chapter is like an episode on something that Mel Robbins says that you can start here to make positive changes in your life. And it's like something specific each chapter. And the stuff that she's telling you probably already know it. It's like, it's obvious stuff, but it's things that I suppose are reminders to you to kind of address things because you've not made these appropriate changes to address these issues. So, you can start here to kind of make these positive changes for your life. It's all about improving your life, being aware of what's happening, trying to make these changes or at least work towards them. So one of the episodes is on happiness, and in this episode Robbins discusses having a natural predisposition towards either optimism or pessimism, and that actually you can still create your own happiness, and you do this by the deliberate actions that you take. There seems to be like this bias in our society that things make us happy, people make us happy, when in reality it's an inside job. So Mel Robbins is talking about that the way to make yourself happy is to have these daily practices that you do that then put you in that kind of happy state. And I think sometimes when people talk about happiness, they neglect that it is a what's the kind of word, like a mindful effort, like it's a intentional process to kind of get you into a happy state. So some of the things that she suggests are gratitude savouring. There's a lot in the literature about happiness, and time again gratitude comes up a lot. And I think the thing about gratitude and why it works is that it creates a distance between you and yourself, what you conceive of as yourself. There's a lot of knowledge and wisdom in old Eastern traditions, for example, like Buddhism, where this concept of the self is what brings you suffering, and to kind of separate yourself from yourself, to separate, it's just a bizarre concept, isn't it? To create that separation, to kind of, become less egocentric, to use the words of Piaget, what was the way that my partner pronounces it? He speaks French, and so, he pronounces it in his pretentious French accent. It's not offensive to French people, just to my partner. Getting off topic, what am I saying? So yeah, gratitude seems to be something that is really effective at making you happy. It takes your focus away from yourself and puts it into kind of the reality of the world, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Another one is moving your body daily. Like, we have evolved to move every single day, And a lot of us have quite sedentary lives, or, I mean, let's have a look at my step count today. I've done 4,940 steps, and that's with a day at work. Less busy than usual because some of my students have finished their exams and have left, and it's a little bit more sedentary than what it would be. But that's not very many steps, really, is it? And I don't feel particularly in my best self because I've been working a lot recently, not been running as much, and I notice the difference. Like, my mood is definitely affected by exercise. If I exercise regularly, I am far more happy. I am far more stress resistant than, you know, not moving daily. So, you know, completely agree with that. And the other one that Mel Robbins suggests that you should make, you kind of like deliberate action to make yourself happy, is to make good connections with other people and the community, that wider community, where you have that opportunity to show acts of kindness. You know, acts of kindness make you feel good about yourself, and people treat you in kind, and then, you know, you feel warm and fuzzy because of that interaction that you have regularly with other people, because you've been kind to them, they're kind to you, and that kind of relationship that you foster with people in that kind of community spirit, it's, you know, it leads to happiness. So I think what's important to kind of highlight in that is that if there's things there that you're not doing, it could explain why you're not feeling that happy. So Mel Robbins is saying, start here and develop these things so that you can feel this kind of contentment, this peace, and this kind of happiness feeling. So I know for me, gratitude is definitely something that I need to practice more of. Moving my body, I know that one already. You know, I just need to actually get back into a good routine with that. And then good connections and community, that's something that I always try and kind of like put into my life now. Another episode was on friendships, and Robbins uses kind of like an analogy of a tree and says that people in your life are either leaves, branches, or roots. And essentially, you know, if you think about leaves, they come with seasons. It's like that kind of saying of like, you know, friends are for reasons, for seasons, and all that kind of stuff. You know, the branches are kind of the parts, the friends that stay around for quite a while. It might prop you up, but, you know, eventually branches can fall down, and then roots are those kind of ones that really ground you. So that's kind of what she was using as kind of her analogy. But what she was stressing was that it's really important to filter your friendships so that you find the right people to connect with, and that you water the ones that are good for you by reaching out to people. So she talks about her experience of being in a friendship group, of experiencing jealousy within that friendship group, until she kind of realised that she just didn't fit in with them. And I really resonated with this episode because I've been in friendship groups before. In fact, I find myself falling into friendship groups quite easily, and I get in these friendship groups with these people, and I might only be actually friends with one or two of them because they're the people that I've connected with, and then I've become part of the group. And I just don't connect with a lot of the people in the group. They're just on a different wavelength to me. They have different interests to me. They have different values to me. They, you know, oftentimes I mean, when I say different values, I'm referring to like their view of life is to be very kind of self-centered and just talk about themselves, and are not interested in connecting with anybody. It's just more of a kind of, you know, reciprocal kind of, what's that kind of word, transactional kind of relationship. So obviously I'm never going to connect with those people. Or like other kind of differences of, some people really like to chat about TV and what's going on in the news. Well, I don't watch TV and I don't listen to the news, so I have no reference points to be able to connect with you on those things. You know, if you want to talk about something a little bit more interesting, obviously I'm very biased, that's my interest, then we could connect on stuff. But yeah, I just don't connect with people that go out drinking all the time and watch TV all the time or on social media all the time. I find that very boring. But what I would do in the past is I would stay in those groups and just feel very different and feel very isolated and feel a lack of belonging in the group, and I'd be with these people and I wouldn't be enjoying myself, and I'd blame myself for that. And then it's only really in the last few years that I've kind of decided that if I'm not feeling it, I'm not being around it. And so I exit group chats and I, stop hanging out with people that I don't enjoy hanging out with. And I don't feel bad about that anymore. And I just think, if I don't connect with you and you're not my kind of person, well then I'm not wasting my time doing that, because, life's too short. And as Robin says, you should be watering those important ones that actually make you feel good and make you feel like you're having a good time around them. Obviously not all the time, because people need support and stuff, but generally making sure that you're not inviting toxic people into your inner circle. You can have them on your peripheries, but you don't want to be inviting them into your house. When I say house, I mean like your inner internal depths of yourself. And she does talk a lot about in the episode about reaching out to people, so actually like asking people to do things with you and things like that. I mean, that's something that doesn't come naturally to me, that like texting people and asking them to hang out and stuff, because it's a bit like, I don't know, I have to feel like I've developed a strong friendship before I do that, and the friendships never get that strong because I don't do that. So you're kind of in that kind of cycle. Obviously, making generalizations there, because I haven't had to do that with people that I have really clicked with and been really good friends with. It's only the people that are not giving that back that's a problem for. So actually that's just a friendship that you don't water. It's interesting, I've been through different periods of my life where I was discovering this about friends, and as soon as I stopped watering the relationship, it just fizzled out, because the other person was not meeting me halfway at all. And it was a bit like, why have I stayed friends with this person for so long when I'm the one that's making all the effort in this friendship? So actually my comment before about how I don't really reach out, I don't think that that's true. I think it was just maybe it was just in a reaction to not getting it back from somebody, so I just don't bother anymore. Maybe that was what it was, and I've not really thought about that. She also comments on how you should give yourself what you're seeking from a friendship. And I've heard this a lot before in various different kind of podcasts and in some books as well. What you kind of seek from others is really a mirror to what you're actually need to provide for yourself. It's the same in relationships. When you're expecting your partner to do something for you to make you feel better, really you should be giving that to yourself if possible, or working on that yourself. Because why are you expecting somebody else to give you that you can find yourself, really? So be a good friend to yourself. So she talks a little bit about that, which is quite interesting. There was an episode on careers, and she suggests that now is just a chapter, and that you don't really have to know where you're going. You just have to start somewhere. I think a lot of the time we get kind of like bogged down by the trajectory of our career and kind of where it's going, and we need to get to this point and that point and that point. But in reality, things change so much and opportunities arise, and if you kind of stick to your plan and you don't kind of pivot in relation to what's going on around you, you'll miss out on lots of opportunities. If I think back to like my career and the different things that I've done, I kind of just went with what felt right at the time, and it's worked out really well for me. And I didn't really kind of like pre-plan it and think about where I wanted to go. And I had general vague ideas, but I didn't, I could not, it's like having a million thoughts at once, which is why I'm like struggling to find a coherent sentence in this second. I was thinking of the Stanford commencement speech, Steve Jobs, I think it was Stanford, where, he says it's difficult to connect the dots looking forward. You've got to kind of look back to connect the dots, and that is what your career is like. You kind of just need to go with what feels right. Like, do you really want to do this? Do you not want to do this? And kind of just go with that. And if you're not happy, like, do something about it. I think about, like, there's a lot of people at my work who just complain all the time, and it's just like, do something about it. And then you'll be doing something that you enjoy and you won't be complaining anymore. Like, you need to make these choices to get where you want to get and get the things that you want. Mel Robbins suggests to follow what makes you feel the most alive, energised and happy, and to consider what you can do to make the world a better place by solving a problem. If you want to try and find purpose in the world, or in your life, shall we say, before you go in the world, find purpose, do something that's useful, like contribute to society in some kind of way. Like, you'll feel really good about yourself because you're helping a lot of people by your contribution. So it's kind of like going with what you feel and trying to be useful will probably help. And she also talks about if you're jealous of somebody in, a career sense, it does give you an indication of what you value, because that's something that you're bothered about, and then you can figure out, okay, that's what's important to me, and that's kind of, what I need to achieve for myself or whatever. I suppose in my own life, I wouldn't say I was jealous, but I think I was very frustrated by the fact that I really wanted to be in a position where I could make effective change. And I couldn't really do that because I always had somebody, I was either in like a team of people that had lots of different ideas and there was no management structure, or I was in a management structure but the manager wasn't very new, like innovative, was kind of, old school and not really kind of considering a better way of doing things and really listening to what kind of was suggested and stuff. I don't know. So I wanted that kind of position, and now I've got that position, so that kind of gave me an indication of what I valued and what I wanted. Another episode is on loving relationships. So Robbins indicates that you need to take responsibility for how you like to receive love and to ask for it. So a lot of the time when people are in relationships, they expect their partner to be a mind reader, and they think that it's obvious how to love them. And unfortunately, it's quite complicated to figure out how somebody likes to be loved. There's different, we talk about different love languages. People like to be loved in different ways, and you have to figure out what you like, and what the other person likes, and to kind of provide that love in different, ways. So I've been giving an example of me in my relationship. My partner really loves words of affirmation. He really loves it when I thank him for things and when I say what a good job he's been doing. And honestly, like, if he was to love me in that way, which he did at the start of our relationship, because you love how you want to be loved. So, you can figure this out quite quickly if you're quite astute, because you can go, well, this person's loving me this way, this is how they like to be loved. Like an example, my nana used to love by buying things, and she used to love receiving gifts. So, it's like, I think she's probably passed that down to my mum a little bit. So it's kind of like, you can kind of figure out people's love languages by seeing how they love. Whereas, like, I like to be loved, and I offer love in this way by acts of service and doing things that reduce the burden on another person, because that's what I want. And so when my partner gives me words of affirmation and when I give him acts of service, we don't end up feeling very loved, because that's not how we like to be loved. So we've had these conversations, and we, and it's a struggle, because, me giving words of affirmation to somebody, if anybody, who's listening knows me, it's very difficult for me, that, because I don't really get it, because I don't need it. So I'm a bit like, oh, this feels weird, but I do it because I love my partner and I want him to feel loved. So it's, you've got to kind of learn these things to have a good relationship. And also the thing as well is asking for it. So asking for how you want to be loved. So I said to my partner really early on in the relationship, I really love being bought flowers, because that makes me feel like you care about me. And obviously this is like completely unconscious, like this is like what I've reflected on why it is that I like the flowers, but it makes me feel cared for. So I've communicated that to my partner, and he always buys me flowers now, and it was just a simple thing. I asked for it, and now I get it all the time, and it's something really easy to do, but I think a lot of people don't ask for it. And you need to tell people how you want to be loved if you want them to get it right. Like, it shouldn't be that you're setting up a trap for them, that, oh, if they get it right, they really love me. Well, no, like, it's complicated. Like, I'm sure you've got it wrong before. Somebody else is probably going to get it wrong when they're trying to love you. She also suggesting going overboard in thanking for what you want and not expecting your partner to mind read what you need. So this is something that I actually learned from my partner as well. So he's very, very good at thanking me for things and being very grateful for things. And I've learned to do that back with him and be very grateful for things, because he responds really well to it. And actually it's a lot more successful in getting what I want by thanking him for all the things that he does for me, because then he continues to do those things because he wants to love me in that way. So it just makes it very easy to have a good relationship. And things like, a lot of relationships struggle because of this mind reading thing, which I mentioned already, but Mel Robbins talks about it a lot. People have different ways of living and different ways of working. And I'll give you an example of something I was just thinking about, this mind reading thing. Me and my partner live together, and he is a little bit less orderly than I am. I'm very, very orderly, and he's less so. He's a little bit more relaxed. And things like cleanliness of the bathroom, for example, is something that I would notice a full week before my partner would notice. So I would know that it needs cleaning, and he would keep on for another week and think that it's fine, and I would get very uncomfortable with how dirty it is. Because I grew up in a household where I didn't even know that you got dust in bathrooms, because for my entire life I had never seen dust in a bathroom, because my mum would clean it every day or every other day, or I don't know how often she cleaned it, but I never saw any dust in the bathroom ever. Like, I did not know that was a thing. Like, bubbles on soap, didn't know that was a thing. Very clean in my old household. So I needed to communicate to my partner when things needed cleaning, otherwise, and who was cleaning them, otherwise I would end up cleaning them and being resentful that I was doing all the chores. So we came up with a really, really simple solution. I came up with a really, really simple solution of just having a little pad of paper that was magnetic on the fridge, and just writing all the jobs that needed doing when we thought of jobs. And obviously my partner never thinks of jobs, it's me that thinks of all the jobs, and I just put all the jobs on. And then we just evenly distribute the jobs, or if one of us is working more than the other, they'll pick up the slack with the cleaning and the cooking and the shopping and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of just do it in a fair way in that way. But that's something that I needed, that I asked for, and I didn't expect him to mind read it. I mean, in the beginning of our relationship I did. I was expecting him to contribute, I was getting very resentful, and I kind of reflected on it and thought, actually, I need to communicate this with him, because, he's a nice person and he's not doing it intentionally. It's just that he doesn't work that way. That's not the way his personality is. And so you have to kind of, ask people for what you need. I need a clean bathroom. So I asked my partner, and the bathroom is now clean. So, problem solved. Robbins also talks a lot in this episode about dealing with toxic behaviours. So she doesn't do what a lot of kind of videos talk about, which is like having a toxic person. She's talking about toxic behaviours. We can all be toxic, if we're stressed, or if we've not eaten that day, we can all be toxic. But it's about recognising those behaviours and kind of addressing those. And Mel Robbins suggests that the best way to deal with them is to create boundaries. Now, she talks a lot about boundaries, and I think it's really important to learn what boundaries are. I mean, I've read a lot of books on boundaries because I recognised in my life that I didn't have any, that I was very open, that I would allow people to do things, and I get very resentful and passive aggressive about it, because in my household at home, there wasn't any boundaries. And I wasn't allowed to kind of express what my needs were or how I felt or what I wanted. Boundaries was not a conversation that was ever had in my household. So I had to kind of teach myself that as an adult and realise how detrimental that had been for me growing up to not have those. And Mel Robbins clarifies that what these are, they're just rules for how you decide people should behave with you. And it's like you are communicating with another person what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. And she suggests that you need to decide for yourself what works for you in terms of your time, how you use your time, whether you want to do that activity or not that someone's asked you to do, the topics that you're willing to discuss. Like, you might want to talk about some things but not talk about others. And just because someone's asked you doesn't mean that you have to talk about it. Your physical stuff. So, if there's a lot of... I have a lot of issues with people violating my boundaries. And I've always felt really kind of like, oh, it's not a big deal and I should just kind of deal with it. But actually, like, it's a boundary. Like, if it's making you feel uncomfortable, that's something that you're not okay with, and you should have a right to communicate that. And I think my problem is that in my childhood, when I've tried to communicate when I've been uncomfortable about something, I've not been heard, and that's not been recognised, and that's not allowed me to feel comfortable saying what my needs are. And luckily in my relationship now, I've managed to kind of work on that, and so that I can take that out into the world and be a little bit more successful with that. So the reason I stopped on this list of physical stuff is because I work in a staff room and I have things on a desk, and it's technically kind of like a hot desking kind of situation, but people will often, and I've sat in there and seen people do this, take things off people's desks, like pens and stuff, and use them and then not put them back, and leave the stuff on your desk and not clean it up after themselves, and things like that. And that makes me incredibly uncomfortable because I can't work in mess, and also because that's my property and people are taking it without asking. And it's like, that's a boundary that I'm uncomfortable with that, and so I should be able to communicate that. But unfortunately, when you do communicate boundaries like that, you get a lot of kickback from people because you stating your boundary means that they can't behave in a way that they want to, which violates you and disrespects you. Like, you're calling them out on it, so you will get challenged on your boundaries. Like, you will, when you say to people, I don't like this and I don't want this, you will get challenged on it. But it's about sticking firm with it and saying, no, this is what I want because this is quite uncomfortable, or whatever is the reason. And I think what's important to kind of recognise here is that you're not trying to make people do things your way. Like, that's not what it is. It's about communicating how you feel about something, and then it's up to the other person whether they do that or not. But then you make the decision whether you continue a relationship with them or not. If it doesn't work for both of you, then perhaps you shouldn't be in that kind of friendship relationship, whatever it is. So another example of like boundary is like how you make yourself available, like whether or not you have time to spend with a person or not, and saying no to things that you believe are not right for you or that isn't right for you. So what Robbins suggests is that you need to communicate these boundaries by planting flags of where your like electric fences are. So what you're doing is you're communicating to the person what's safe for them in this relationship and what you're not okay with. So what's an electric fence where they can get electrocuted if they do that, which means that you're training people of how to respect you. You're training them in terms of what you're okay with and what you're not, and that if you don't respect that, that's an electric shock. So it's kind of like there's a consequence if you don't respect the boundary. And it's interesting because, I've had this in my life where somebody has spoken to me in a way that was very disrespectful, and I've said to them, I don't have people in my life that speak to me like that, If you want to remain in a relationship with me, then you need to respect me and not speak to me in that way. And the person didn't respect that and didn't respond positively to that and continued to be quite hostile. So my response to that was that I just blocked them on everything and I didn't speak to them again. And I came into contact with this person again after, a stretch of time, many months, and that person wanted to build a bridge again. And it was like, okay, the bridge can be built, but you need to respect me and not speak to me in that way. And since then, they haven't done. And so it's like, you have to show that this is my boundary, this is what I'm okay with, this is what I'm not okay with, so that you can allow people to love you, and you can allow people to show you that they respect you and that they respect those boundaries and that they will only do what is comfortable for you. And then you learn to trust other people then as well. Because if you're always expecting people to violate your boundaries and they're doing it in a horrible way and you've not communicated to them what your boundaries are, then you never really build those strong relationships with people, because you're not giving them the opportunity to show you that they can be respectful of you. I think what a lot of people feel when they set a boundary is that they feel guilty for having that boundary, and that they feel empathy for the other person who is violating their boundaries. And they also don't react to people that are quite antagonistic and, violate the boundaries just to get a rise out of you. It's like, if you don't address these things, then people are going to just do what they want to do and not respect you. And it's important that you kind of work on that for your own kind of sanity in the world. I was just thinking of a conversation that I'd had many years ago about how this woman told me this story of how she was working, and this colleague kept using a cup to drink out of, and she said that's fine, but she wasn't washing it up. She was leaving it dirty and she had to come and wash a cup. And so she confronted her about it, and at the time of her telling me, I was like, I must have been about 20 odd, like mid-20s when she told me this story. I was horrified at the fact that she'd like confronted her, and I thought, oh, that's really like hostile and really kind of like I was scared of the response from the other person, and obviously felt guilty and felt like my needs didn't matter and all this lot. And as an adult, more of an adult now, 10 years later, I kind of realised actually that that's just childhood trauma replaying, and that's not the reality of the world that you live in normally. Like, people generally do respect you if you tell them where the line is. If you don't tell them where the lines are, they're going to get it wrong. And I think this is what Mel Robbins kind of emphasised in this episode, is that you have to tell people what your kind of rules are for a successful relationship, for you to actually have one. And in this episode, Robbins also discusses strategies for reducing anxiety. So that how to achieve goals by habit creation, and how we think about money and the blocks that we have from childhood. So there's like a few, I suppose they get quite random at that point. And I did enjoy the book. I did enjoy listening to Mel Robbins. I think she's very easy to listen to. But I do feel like she's very influenced by everyone else who's on the self-help circuit, because she's mentioned a lot of things that other people have talked about, but she's doing it in a very kind of superficial, kind of light touch way, whereas other people have done those things in a lot more depth. So I suppose it's quite good to introduce people to these concepts, but she's not crediting anybody. She's kind of just acting as if these are her own ideas, and they're not her own ideas. She's taking them from everybody else that's kind of got these ideas. So like, for example, when she was talking about achieving goals by habit creation, well, there's a whole book called Atomic Habits by, I think, James Clear. It's a fantastic book about habit stacking, which is way more in-depth and knowledgeable than what Mel Robbins is talking about in this episode. And then she's also talking about these blocks about money, And again, there's a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad that goes into loads of depth about that and analysis about that. So I feel like she's kind of, I want to say, being influenced, inspired by them, but I feel like she's just kind of, misappropriating what they've said to get like another episode into a kind of audio book. So because of that, I felt a little bit like, oh, she's kind of exhausted everything that she can say in her other kind of books, and now she's kind of thinking, oh, what else can I talk about? Or let's talk about what everyone else is talking about, what's successful in the, it's kind of like a marketing strategy, isn't it? It's like no one's really creating any kind of like new kind of stuff. It's like an example when people do book reviews, they just watch all the other book reviews and then comment in the same way about the same stuff rather than actually talking about what they actually think about it, which you'll never find me doing because I haven't got time to look at other people's book reviews, to be honest. So yeah, I gave it a 3 stars out of 5, Goodreads 3 stars, because I did enjoy it, but I do feel like, you can get better help on how to change from other books that do it in a lot more detail. Like, for example, from this, maybe like an example, the habit stuff that was good, I've read books on habits to, improve those. The ones about boundaries, I've read books about boundaries that are more in depth to do those. The thing about friendships, I've read books about friendship. So all these kind of things that she's talking about, I have read books on them all already because they were areas to kind of develop in my own kind of life. And so I suppose it's just nice to have a reminder, and I suppose as well, really, when I listen back to it and think about all these things, it shows me how much progress that I've made, how much growth I've had as a person whilst this has been, whilst my life has been kind of, unfolding. So I suppose it was quite good for that reason as well. And if you're interested in Mel Robbins' other books, I've done, reviews for the other 2 as well.